Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to our RISE Ambassador interviews all the way from Aotearoa in New Zealand. And it's amazing to have with me today, on Monday actually, it's Monday the 11th of April, and I'm with the Global Director of Kia New Zealand, who is here with me today, and her name is Ngapera Riley. Nau mai, haere mai, Ngapera.
Kia ora, Rachel. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's so lovely to have you. And you look like you're in the corner office, and it could be anywhere in the world, maybe even New York.
Oh, maybe. Yes, well, today I'm interviewing today from the wonderful High Street in Auckland. I'm just in the boardroom here at Kia, which is the Kiwi Expats Association. And yes, been busy doing mahi for World Class New Zealand, which is the network I'm in charge of.
Fantastic. And we're going to learn a little bit more about your global role. But as you know, with this interview series, interviewing men and women around the world about women in leadership, about the gender equality, pay parity, and what that means to you personally.
Okay, right.
And what I thought I'd like to start with is for you to do an introduction about yourself, so people can get to know you. And I know you have a wonderful story to tell about where you come from, your iwi, your people. And so I'd really love you to start with that, Ngapera.
Of course. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Ngāpera Riley tōku ingoa, no Rotorua hau, ko Te Arawa te iwi, ko Ngāti Uenukukopako, Ngāti Rorooterangi, Ngāti Whakau e rawa ko tūhaurangi o Kuhapu. I was born and raised in the beautiful town of Rotorua, and I'm the second oldest of 7 children in my whānau. And we grew up, went to, a small high school in Rotorua, and I studied at the University of Auckland. And initially I was studying at the School of Medicine in Auckland, wanted to be a doctor, and had big ambitions for that. But I ended up changing courses and graduating with a Bachelor of Health Science, with a big focus on helping Māori women in particular in health. So I worked for the Ministry of Health for a few years. But in between that, I had also grown up going to New York City as a child and Australia, where my aunties lived. And they were a very big influence in my life. And I was given an opportunity to go and work in New York City, which holds a very special place in my heart. And I moved there when I was 23 and stayed there for nearly 12 years, and had an opportunity to work in New York City and represent the New Zealand government with New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. I worked across a lot of different sectors, and primarily though my mahi was to help New Zealand do business in the United States. It was a very privileged and wonderful work, and I decided to come home in 2010, where I came back and I wanted to have a bit of a change from corporate and work in education. So I went back to Rotorua and I worked on some programs helping re-engage Māori into education. And also worked in the music industry and a few other areas. And I was called back to come and work for Kia, which is the Kiwi Expats Association. It's essentially a global organisation made up of New Zealanders around the world who want to give a little bit back to their country, whether that's time or advice or giving knowledge. So it's all about manaakitanga. And so I was 2 years ago appointed as the Global Director of the World Class New Zealand Network. Sounds fancy, and it is a bit fancy actually. Essentially, it's an invitation-only network made up of globally successful and influential New Zealanders and friends of New Zealand all around the world, all who've put their hands up to give a little bit back. And we call on them from time to time to help New Zealand businesses, or it might be cultural development or economic development. Some amazing high-level projects that we're working on all over the world.
Wow. And that's how I came into connection with Ngapera and our other mutual friend, Tanya Beasley. And Tanya is in London, obviously working for Kia. And what I know about Kia, and you know, I feel very honoured to be a world-class New Zealander as part of this invite-only network, is that there are 500,000 connections through this network globally. And what I love about how they've evolved is that they've kept the global outreach feeding back into New Zealand and then back out. It's like this amazing flow of connection and as you say, manaakitanga, which in our culture is about supporting one another.
Yes, and giving back if and when you are able to.
Yes, absolutely.
Essentially, we want to support New Zealanders and people in Aotearoa to compete on the global stage. You know, many people think of us as a small country down the bottom of the world, but we think, given our global spread and the amazing people and skills that we have, that we can have the impact of a big country in the middle of the world, especially if we can utilise technology. And something unique to Aotearoa New Zealanders is that ability to want to connect and to want to give back and to help each other for no other reason that we have a connection back home. And that's quite a beautiful thing.
Very unique and really special, I believe.
Yes.
So let's understand a little bit more about who has inspired you. You've obviously been leading in multiple industries.
Yes.
You've now landed in this really amazing job, and I always think of you as a super connector. Yeah, you are the super connector. So who has inspired you, Ngapera, to get to where you are today? Who is that person, or who are those people that have inspired you?
Well, I think we've all grown up with many people who inspire us. And I've been very fortunate and privileged my whole life to be surrounded by very strong women. And, you know, in all my roles, nearly all my roles, I have had female CEOs and leaders. But when I think about all the people, there's number one, Dr. Paparangi Reid at the University of Auckland. She's an amazing professor and leader, and I always admired her strength. She was never afraid to stand up and speak her mind, and she always stood strong in this amazing presence and was able to deliver her message very clearly. And also with a bit of wit, which was beautiful. But I think probably the person that had the biggest influence on me and still does today is my older sister. Her name's Aroha Armstrong. She's a serial entrepreneur. She's just sold, I think, her 4th business. And she's always following her passion, whatever she's passionate about and makes her happy and what she's really good at. And I think that's really unique. She's managed to turn that into a business and inspire a team around her to make those businesses successful. Everything from arts and designing jewellery and creating arts to more recently she had a child's, what would you call it, an indoor playland. And she set it up with a Māori focus. And so she's a very strong Māori businesswoman, and she's very proud about that. She's a mother, she's a wife, she gets involved with community, but she's got a very strong, clear business head, and she's highly intelligent and she's conscientious, and I always admire that. And so she can stand up and deliver messages very profoundly, and she's also eloquent. She's also unashamedly Māori. And proud to be so, and she takes that with her wherever she goes in the world and in her business dealings. So currently she's sold her last business, and she's currently working full-time to help develop Māori businesses, which I think is super cool.
Wow, I love her. I can't wait to meet her.
She's awesome.
And, you know, to have those types of role models, and we call it in our culture, to a kind of taina relationship, is very special and very, it's very rewarding to have that relationship as you are growing up and going through, you know, career.
Absolutely, and still call her just about at every point and turn as we do for advice on how to deal with particular situations. And even sometimes if she doesn't know, she always manages to give that really beautiful advice, and you know, everything will be okay, and we'll work it out.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
And that entrepreneurial thinking, you know, in my view, having been abroad like yourself and coming back in, is a unique leadership trait.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a unique leadership trait, but it's a unique trait in that entrepreneurs work 10 times harder than everybody else. And they have to be flexible and adaptable, and, you know, and that's just being an entrepreneur. This isn't on top of being a mother to 3 children and giving back to the community and then getting stuck in at the marae if there's anything that needs to be done there. So it is a beautiful trait, that entrepreneurial trait.
Yeah. And the what we know to be called now, that sort of growth mindset.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yep. That I believe Māori women in general can bring to that leadership space, given the opportunity to be able to engage in those types of conversations and that progressive way of thinking.
Absolutely, and just not taking no for an answer, I think. And just there's a certain stubbornness about entrepreneurs that almost drives them to think differently and disruptively and get things done. And I think when you mix that with a woman and with a Māori woman, there's a really magical combination that comes out of that, because they're always inclusive. It's an inclusive leadership style. It's an emotional, you know, there's that emotional intelligence that's kind of underlies everything that they do. And yeah, it makes it lovely to work with those kinds of ladies.
I know how you feel. I get to work in that space, and you know, around indigeneity and indigenous cultures, it just fills me with so much gratitude, I think, to be able to work in that way. And it's not a linear way of working. And you know, Ngapera, and we've had these conversations, the traditional models of organizations, which is the power sits at the top with one, is quite different in our Te Ao Māori view, where it's the power is distributed to many. So we have more of that bottom up approach to leadership, which is, you know, if you need a term, it's more of a collective leadership style.
Absolutely. I think it has to be when you're Māori.
And how does that translate into corporate world now? How does that?
Well, I think increasingly it's becoming more and more not so much accepted, but it's becoming more and more that the way people are having to do things, because people realise that they're not specialists in everything, that we must call on others for help and support and advice. And that's why the mahi we do at CARE, which is connecting our 1 million expats, is exactly like that. You know, and this whole notion of creating a borderless nation that can stand out on the global economy and stage, we have to draw on each other's skills. Yeah. It's a very collective way of thinking. And even the way that we work, because we're a not-for-profit, and we're all based on manaakitanga, which is giving back. So I think that streams directly into that collective way of working. It's a clever way of working.
Yeah. And the word that always comes to me when I think of collective leadership is it's more sustainable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm very lucky. We've got a wonderful board and a CEO who is very much in that mindset around bringing in the expertise and reaching out if we don't know, if we're unsure in a different area, to try and get the best advice possible.
Fantastic. And those are the conversations that have started to happen as I've transitioned back into Aotearoa in New Zealand. But I believe there needs to be more conversations had. Yes. And change is always a little bit scary when we first start having those conversations, but the more dialogue we can have, I believe the more we can start to implement things that serve many versus few.
Absolutely.
So as we have just, I mean, we're in April now, but we've been through International Women's Day, which was, like every year, March the 8th.
Yes.
And one of the things that I really found, a bit frustrating was coming back into Aotearoa and not really seeing a collective effort around celebrating everything that has gone before us, where we are now, and looking to the future. If you weren't in roles like ours, I feel very privileged, and I don't know about you, to have access to all of that. But in general, I didn't see much happening around International Women's Day, so I decided to start this series to continue the conversation and the dialogue.
Yes.
So in terms of gender equality, gender parity, what has been your experience in breaking down some of those barriers, those glass ceilings, as we call it, in order for you to progress in the way that you've progressed? What's your perspective on how far we've come or not?
Oh, that's a big question. Thinking of all my lovely academic professors in that space who will be, I'm calling on you now to help me. It's an exciting space. I think, like I said, I'm very lucky to be, I think, born at the age that I am. I'm 36 now. And so I've always had women around me in leadership positions. And I've always kind of called upon mentors within different businesses and that I've worked in to give me advice on some of those tricky matters, whether it be because I don't feel like I'm being heard, or wanting a specific promotion but knowing, wanting advice on how to get up there, or what's the approach, because it seemed like it was different for men than it was for women. But also, I think part of my mana as pride as Māori, and coming from a very strong kind of maternal line, was that I always just went out there and just went for it. Yeah. But again, talking about that collective, I never went for a senior role if I didn't kind of work on the relationship side of it. So I always knew, okay, who are the influencers? Who are the decision makers, and how do I build my relationships to eventually carve out a way for me to sit at that table and be in the decision making chair, so to speak. So I think it was my sister that gave me advice, I think even in my first role, way back when I was just out of university and, all nervous about a job interview. That's advice that has just stuck with me in terms of, no, you're actually super awesome. You're an educated Māori woman. There's not many of us who want to play in this space. So create your space, take pride in your space, and just go for it, and
own that space. Own that space.
Own that space. Yeah, create the space, own the space. And that's kind of how I've worked. And again, with that collective spirit. So you find your champions, and whether, and a lot of those times, those will be people on the chair or people on the board. So you have to build friendships and find your space and know your strengths. So knowing your strengths is really, really important. But even though I am in this very privileged role, global director, I'm surrounded by, I'll just reel off a few amazing women in our network, aside from the amazing Rachel, who's just delightful. So we've got the Right Honourable Helen Clark, who's working in the United Nations Development Programme. We've got the likes of Frances Valentine, who is an education futurist and actively working to change the future of education. I've got Dr. Karen Wilcox, who's a professor of aeronautics and astronautics at MIT. She's coming in for lunch next week, which I'm so excited about. We've got movie producers and actresses. We've got entrepreneurs like Claudia Batten. So I'm surrounded by incredible, incredible women. Yet when I look at the makeup of our network, there's still very few women in comparison to the amount of men that are in there. And partly that's because we've been handed the network as it's grown over the last 10 years. But I feel a really core sense of responsibility that when I'm looking at who and who's going to come into the network next, that there should be, that diversity is super important. And that doesn't, that's sometimes a controversial conversation where people are saying, well, you can't just choose someone to come in the network just because they're a woman. I said, no, but if we aren't mindful in the decisions that we make, and people are looking up to this network, so if we don't make a concerted effort to include women and different cultures and ethnicities and genders and the whole thing that is encompassing of diversity, sectors, industry. We've got a lot in banking and finance, for example. What about science? What about sustainability and health? So I take it on as a very big responsibility to help drive that diversity, just not in my network, but because when people look at our network and they hopefully are going to see this really beautiful, diverse network with incredible women who are chosen based on their experiences and what they can bring to the table. It's important, and it's important to be conscious of it, and it's important to actively choose and be that, have that in the back of how you're doing, the mind of how you're doing those things, and your mindset is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So that it becomes a part of the way you think naturally, as opposed to a forced, Yeah.
So that conscious.
We're working towards, yes.
So that consciousness about how you are being, how you are operating becomes just, it sounds like to me, becomes very natural about how you engage with your audience, how you bring people on board and induct people into the network.
Not only just for my company, so people come to advice for me and to our network about, we've got CEO roles, we're looking for people on the board. So naturally I'm looking at the other board and I'm questioning them to say, absolutely, have you considered these women as part of your board? Or if I notice it's a very male-dominated board, I won't be afraid to question it and say, well, it seems like you've got a very male-dominated board. Have you considered women, or have you considered younger people on your board? Have you considered a digital aspect? So as well as becoming a natural part of the way I think for my business, I'm using the influence and my role to encourage others to think about it too. I question them. I get a lot of people come to me for award ceremonies saying, can you help us nominate for the High Tech Awards or for the Women of Influence Awards, or keynote speakers. So when I work with them to develop programs or look at what they're working with, I always question them. I think it's just naturally because, I question them. Why haven't you got any woman on there? Some cases, there's a very big conference coming up, and I was like, you've got one woman and 19 men. Does that not feel wrong to you? Even from an audience perspective, let alone the reflection that it's going to have on your business. So in those ways, I can help champion change a little bit and help pose the question of diversity and inclusion. Just in those, I guess it's active, but it's a little bit proactive.
Yeah, I'd say it's very proactive, actually. And, at the end of the day, what we are talking about in our dialogue is that you get into the dialogue of, why is it this way? Yeah, and you'll ask your own questions. You'll ask it in your own way. But to have a voice and to be able to challenge without emotion, it's just a question at the end of the day.
Yes.
And so to have that ability to do that, Ngāpera, is a very proactive approach, I believe.
Absolutely. And it does help that I have a wonderful database full of amazing women that I can very politely make suggestions.
And you're very good at making suggestions.
Yes, very politely make suggestions and put people's profiles and the work that they've achieved and their accomplishments very gently in front of people. And that speaks for themselves. I mean, these women, the women in our network and around the world are incredible, but we have to get better at telling their stories so that they can rightly take their place in leadership positions.
And I think it would be wrong of us not to mention someone who has taken her rightful place, and that would be Beatrice Whenua, who is absolutely a world-class New Zealander. So she's just stepped into one of your favourite places in the world, New York.
Absolutely. She is the new Trade Commissioner and Consul General in New York City. And as far back as they've been pretty good with hiring women into the Trade Commissioner roles around the world, and especially in New York. Since I've lived and worked there, we've had 3 female Trade Commissioners. But I'm super excited about Beatrice because she just has such a unique presence, not to mention the profile, but she has a beautiful mana about her, and she's super intelligent, and she's a superb connector. And so actually when that role came up with NZTE, I put it in front of Beatrice and I said, you should apply for this role. I think that you would be an amazing ambassador for Aotearoa, for all the reasons that Queen Bee is amazing. And that is, like I said, her presence, her mana, her intelligence, and her ability to make connections and present us on the world stage. She's a beautiful public speaker too, and that's very hard to find.
Yeah, and that beautiful Indigenous side of her, being Samoan as well, I think is just a wonderful combination to be able to see someone of her stature, Olympian,
yes.
Female, talented, and, taking her rightful place. I love it.
Absolutely. And a CEO. Everyone always mentions the amazing accomplishments she's achieved in sports. But she's also a CEO as well, and she's a businesswoman, and she's dedicated to the community. She's on the Well Foundation, helping with out West Auckland and North Shore with health projects. So she's just phenomenal. She's just a beautiful soul, and I feel very proud that she's representing us in New York City, and I look forward to seeing her over there when we visit in a few months.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see the reunion already.
Yes.
So we are in this, I've always wanted this series to be also about future-focused issues around gender, diversity and inclusion. What do you see is our opportunity as women stepping into leadership? What do you see as a real, it might be I'm not going to say a trend, it might be something that you've read about that you think is a unique opportunity for women to step into leadership. And one of the things that I feel is a real opportunity is for New Zealand women, Māori women, Indigenous women, is to look at that more of a global perspective.
Yes.
And that's why I was really keen to connect with you. How do we make that? How do we get more visibility, accessibility to those kinds of opportunities in the future?
Well, I think two areas come to mind. One thing that's really pertinent is the digital and the technology space, because I truly believe that, technology is here. Digital, it's not the future, it really is the now. It's enabling you and I to interview in real time in 2 different spaces and allowing connections, which is a beautiful thing. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity in that space. I'm currently working on, with another world-class New Zealander who's ex-Google, on creating, we've realised there's a lack of digital focus, digital leadership for New Zealand businesses. So we're now looking internationally around how can we put together a cohort of people who are in the digital space, technology, app developers, social media movement, in that disruptive area, that we can call on them and encourage New Zealand businesses to include a digital expertise on their boards. Because if you look at current boards, they're very traditional in New Zealand still. So I think that ensuring female representation on boards and director positions is essential, because you need that balance. You need that balance in any area, but especially in that top leadership balance that's going to influence the future of a company. And I think that having that digital element and encouraging our young people to get on board and be in that space is going to be crucial, because as you know, it's very tough to get in board positions and executive director positions for anybody, let alone a woman, and let alone if you're under 50. But I think that this digital board movement could really help create space, A, for younger people, and B, for women, because women are at the forefront of this digital disruptive movement. There's lots of entrepreneurs out there, and so I think it's a really unique opportunity for women around the world, for board positions here, but also to influence globally. Because I think in the future, you're not going to have to be in the same boardroom. You can connect by any means, it doesn't matter. So if we're ahead of that technology, we're on top of it, we're utilising it, we're encouraging it, that's going to create space for women and younger people, and lots of space for new people to come into these positions of influence.
Yeah, love it. And I'm on a board with Rhonda Kite in Abu Dhabi, and I've never had to be there. It's all done digitally, it's all done via Skype. So absolutely, this is the way of working, because it's a borderless global economy now. And if you look at flying times now, you can fly 17 hours direct from Qatar to Auckland.
Yeah.
And you're right in the middle of the Middle East. I think Emirates are flying something like that, around 18 or 19 hours to Dubai. It's really changing the way that we connect, and technology will be on our planes, and the planes will just fly longer and longer, further and further.
We may need to travel less.
Yeah.
I also think another important part is to continue celebrating stories. So we need to celebrate the success. The fact that Beatrice is the Trade Commissioner for New York, and she's a Pacific Island woman representing Aotearoa, that's incredible.
It is.
And unless we tell the stories of these amazing people like Precious Clark and Anna Morrison that are on boards, and they are representing our people superbly, we've got to tell the stories so that it creates a sense of normalcy. Yeah. To see a young woman under 50 representing at the highest level. I think that's really important, that we continue to tell these stories and tell them better.
Yeah. And, one day, Ngapera, maybe we're having conversations, and, that's really an aspiration that I've always thought about, is we won't be talking about their gender. We'll just be talking about their leadership.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. It'll just be, Ngapera Riley is an amazing leader, irrelevant of her that she's a woman, because you're the right person for the role.
Absolutely.
So that's the future,
isn't it?
It's exciting, and as you say, really, privileged to be born in this era.
Absolutely. Yes. For many reasons.
Yeah.
As a woman, as a human.
Yeah. And so we remember everyone that has come before us.
Yes.
And we are never alone. We take them with us when we are the only woman in a boardroom meeting, when we may be the only woman in a leadership team, or or we travel abroad. I know for me, I've never felt alone, because we have all of our ancestors that have gone before us, all the women who came before us, to carve that pathway for all of us, that we can stand here today. Right. And going forward, is for what I'm hearing from you is really bringing as many of our next generation young rangatahi, younger woman, millennial women with us as we move forward, as we rise.
Super, super important. Working on a project with Callaghan Innovation at the moment to get some aspiring Māori entrepreneurs to Silicon Valley. They're trying to do that through iwi and working with businesses like our world-class New Zealanders and Google, for example, to show them what's out there. But I think importantly too, I've started a mentoring program with AUT. This is with First and Family scholars. And connecting them with global mentors so that they can have mentors here too and wraparound support within their schools. But this is the point of difference here is that this is a global. I want them to think global and international and outside our borders. And my aim is that leads into global internship programs. Because I really think that we need to start including young people in the boardrooms and the decision-making processes, because they're important. If you look at Google and some of the biggest companies in the world, which are defining technology for the future, they're working with 10-year-olds. That is our future. And we have to do it now because everything's moving so fast. So if we don't include the rangatahi, we're doing a disservice to ourselves and to the future of this world. So I strongly believe in inclusion of youth across many different projects, and they should be on the board too. What if that was it? What if people were including a young person on their board of directors? What an amazing opportunity that would be.
And I know that some of them already are, and Auckland Council have are looking at and have a rangatahi on their board. I don't know in what capacity. And what I know about that generation is they are so resourceful. They have the ideas, they have the inspiration, and we're not giving them a voice to be heard. And we need to be conscious of bringing new boards together, bringing new organizations together, bringing new enterprises together when they are not represented.
Absolutely.
Because that is not the future. That is not the future. So it's exciting times.
It's exciting. Things are changing, but they need to.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I just wanted to, so thank you for your whakaaro, your thoughts, your perspectives. I think what I love is, I love that you are always looking out. And then how can we bring some of that amazing knowledge back into Aotearoa as well?
Absolutely.
And so I wanted to end on, would you mind sharing about your music passion? Because I think that really sums up, also what you're about as well, because it's a big part of your life, and I wouldn't like to leave that out.
Oh, yes. Well, in another life, I am a professional singer. I've sung for about 15 years. Again, it started at school in kapahaka and things, and it wasn't really until I was able to, I guess as a young woman, as you grow and you find confidence in yourself in your 20s, that I realised I had a particular skill and that I actually loved performing. So I worked with others and slowly went about developing a career as an artist. And using my voice and my God-given talents, and also the performance aspect. I guess confidence is not something everybody can display as a performer. So I've been very lucky. I've sung here and overseas, and I perform in many different bands. And the thing that I love about entertainment is just the pure sense of joy that you give to other people. As an entertainer, for me anyway, it's never about me. It's about the audience, and are they enjoying themselves? And when you understand how hard people work and all the dumb stuff that goes on in life, just to have a few hours where you can entertain somebody and put a smile on someone's face is a beautiful thing, and it's about giving back. And it's also about sharing talents. So when I developed the Academy of Singing and Music in Rotorua for the many talented youth down there, it was all just about creating a platform for them to use their talents. One thing I used to say was, hey, don't be selfish. You know, you've been given this gift, you've been given this taonga, a gift, and not everybody has that gift. So it's up to you to share it and use it. Use it for others. Use it to help get out your own story, but use it for the benefit of giving others enjoyment. You know, that's a very beautiful thing about giving back. And so I love singing. It's hard work sometimes, but I love it. And, you know, there's moments where you don't do it, that you feel like, oh, I think I need to sing. Music is one of those things. Music it's a global thing. It doesn't matter what language you speak in, you're able to convey emotion through music, and it's a global, it's unspoken, it's an unspoken way of communicating, and I love it. Yeah.
It transcends cultures, it transcends continents, and yeah, I think music, dancing, singing is a great way to also let it all go.
And you can't hold a diva down. Sometimes the fabulous just comes out.
I love it. So I want to thank you and acknowledge you, Ngapera, for everything that you are, everything that you do, and how you give back so much of yourself. But what I also love is that you stay true to self in everything that you do, and that you continue to connect with multiple countries, multiple cultures all over the world, purely with the sense of giving back. So thank you.
Thank you, and I look forward to being in touch soon.
Yeah, you have a great time and enjoy Perth.
I will, thank you. Bye.
Ka kite.